Welcome to the Return of WADJEDI Serpent Power Podcast. Here we explore the science of serpent energy and how it is used in yoga, ritual, and medicine to achieve the highest levels of fitness, emotional and sexual wellness, financial prosperity, healing, and spiritual mastery. I'm your host, Fly Priestess, and I invite you to join me on this captivating journey of self-discovery and empowerment. Greetings and welcome to another episode of Return of WADJEDI Serpent Power Podcast. I'm your host, Raven Alvarez, aka the Fly Priestess. So tonight we are going into the second part of our mini-series, our micro-series. We have a series within a greater series, talking about the overall spiritual anatomy. And within our spiritual anatomy series, we have a smaller series where we are discussing the chakras. We're talking about the chakras, the common chakras from 1 through 7, as well as we'll be discussing later on in the series. We'll be discussing the other chakras, the minor chakras, as well as the chakras that are above the head and below the root. So for tonight, we're getting into the sacral. So although once we get to the heart chakra, we're going to discuss more about how that chakra is actually the first chakra and not the center chakra. But we began with the root because that's the most common one that people are aware of as a point of origin. And we've moved on to the sacral. So let us go back again. We're going to go over the basics of the root chakra, and then we're going to jump into some personal anecdotes, because it's important as we go on our spiritual journey to remember always to tie back our mission, our goals, our destiny, our understanding of all of this back into the life we're actually living right now. You know, sometimes we step over these things and we get so lost in the loftiness and the bigness of it all that we forget to keep things simple. And it's in the simplicity where the real understanding, where the real use, where the real functionality of all of this spiritual information and wisdom comes. So let's jump into just a few things about the sacral chakra. So just going back again over the basics. So we know, the sacral chakra is located in between the root and the solar plexus. It's covered by the sense of taste. The element that's associated with the sacral chakra is water, anything fluid and flowing. The color is orange. And the basic principle of the sacral chakra is about creativity and reproduction. So it's about reproducing your thoughts and manifesting them into a physical reality. It's about creating and producing a baby. It's about anything to do with production. The place in the body where the sacral is located is in the pelvic area. So the reproductive organs, the kidneys, the bladder, and also all liquids in the body, including blood, lymph, the gastric juices, the digestive, and the sperm, the fluid that the sperm is in, as well as vaginal juices. So all of those things are all connected to the sacral. So all of the fluids. Also, these are all connected to different astrological signs and planets that have energy that gives influence over the sacral chakra. So let's talk about those. Give me one moment here and let me get some fluid into myself, a little sip of water. Oh, there we go. Nothing like a dry spell in the middle of a podcast. All right, so back to the astrological signs. So the signs of Cancer and the moon are very especially associated with the sacral. The moon is about receptivity and mystery and fertility and about emotions. And those things are very connected to the sacral. The sacral is our source and center of pleasure. And so in connection to pleasure, also Libra, which is associated with the planet Venus, and Scorpio, which is associated with the planet Pluto, those are about sensual desires, about transforming your personality through giving up yourself into union with another. So the root chakra is about the self. It's about survival, about taking care of the self, about developing habits and behaviors that ensure survival of the self. And those can take on an emotional turn. They can be connected to the physical world and all sorts of other things. But at the sacral, that's the level of where we are. Our personal needs are already met. We've already designed a way, whether we have designed the way through trauma or through healthy interaction with others. We've designed a way to survive. And now we move into a space where we're connecting with others, where we're not just self-aware, like how little children are just aware of self. Now we're aware of others. We're aware of connection to others and the need to be around and to be connected to others. And there are so many ways to express this desire for connection with others. But this desire for connection is a natural desire that leads to a union, because the union between ourselves and another being, whether that union is through ideas that we put together and build something, whether we put together bodies and create a child, it's about connecting with others and the blending of two into one. So sexuality, because people very, very often just associate survival with the root and sexuality with the sacral, and that's not actually true. In each chakra, there is a level of behavior, a type of energy, a way of bringing things that decides which chakra which energy is connected to each of these. So sexuality, when sexuality is about procreation, when it's about reproduction, when it doesn't have anything to do with pleasure specifically, when it's connected to our survival, our need to reproduce ourselves so that we ensure our genetic survival. In this case, the sacral is connected to the sexuality is connected to the root chakra, whereas sex for the sake of pleasure with another person is connected to the sacral. So let's go into what kind of things give harmony. Like, what is the purpose? If somebody is new, if you're listening and you're brand new to the chakras and you don't really understand what is the purpose of even knowing this stuff. What is this woo stuff? What is this? Why, what can chakras do for me? What can my knowledge of this even do for me? Now, the purpose of harmony in the chakras. So I'm going to talk about how you behave, how your being flows under a harmonious sacral chakra. And the chakras are, understanding them and how they work and how they interact is as integral from the spiritual level as understanding, say, psychology would be from a regular scientific world level. When we understand the nature of how the mind develops, even though we can't see the mind or touch the mind with typical instruments, there's an understanding of how the mind develops. So in a child, we can say, okay, if a child experiences this, or if a person experiences that, these are the likely outcomes. These are the stages of development and shifting and growth and behavior that they will go through. And because we know those things, we are in a better position to be able to address how to respond to somebody's needs when any of these things when something has happened to them and is off. When we can be able to recognize when somebody is not functioning from a place of harmony. So understanding the chakras is the same type of thing. Understanding what it is that a person that has caused disharmony, we can identify the disharmony and we can locate it to which particular chakra. And then by knowing that, we can also work to bring it back into alignment, which is super important. So when the sacral chakra is functioning harmoniously, we have this natural flow of life, our feelings, we're comfortable with our feelings, we're self-aware of our own emotions. If somebody says how are you doing? You're not just good, 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 and no matter who asks you or anything like that, you're just good, good. You have this reflexive good. And if somebody says, well, how are you really doing today, man? Like, how are you really? And you pause and hesitate, and you can't quite go down in yourself to try to answer this question from a real place. That's a disconnection with feelings. And that is something when the sacral chakra becomes blocked, either blocked or when it's just not functioning sufficiently or efficiently, it makes a blockage there. And so we can't really connect with how we feel. And that's important. It's important for us to know, because a lot of times our feelings are our emotional guidance system. Our emotions guide us to what things in life are good for us and useful for us and what things are not. So we want to know at all times how we feel, because if we lose touch with how we are really feeling, we're losing touch with what direction it is that we want to take our life in. So it's actually very important to know how we feel. If we have a healthy, harmonious sacral chakra, it's very, I won't say easy, but it's very deep. You can connect with somebody from a place of deep love, like sexual union that creates the kind of depth where there's that like earth-shattering, transformative energy where the love is connected so deeply between you and the other person that you feel shifted, you feel changed by the sexual experience. Like sexual experiences that are that deep don't happen for everyone. For example, if somebody is addicted to pornography, or they have sex with a different person every day, and they're trying to get sex for the sake of pleasure or for some survival need that has been damaged, and they're trying to compensate in some way, that isn't ever going to shift into a deep and powerful, divine, sacred sexual union. That kind of union is off limits to a person who is just having random sex with different people, or having sex with somebody who you know perfectly well doesn't love you. If you have sex with somebody who has at best a passing interest in you, or even worse, having sex with somebody who doesn't respect you, doesn't honor you. And this is for men and women. Somebody who doesn't respect you or doesn't honor you, when you're having sex with a person like that, you are degrading your spirit to a place where it can never open up and actually flow freely into a state that brings on that powerful like union, that powerful connection to divine energy. When you are disharmonious in the sacral chakra, this can happen well, let's jump back to the kind of things that create that sort of situation. So what happens? What is disharmonious functioning? That means anything disharmonious is just like in psychology. When things are functioning in a way where you do not operate with habits and choices and perspectives that have your best interest in mind, that is disharmonious. So when you seek out sexual experiences that are cheap and quick, when deep inside what you actually want is some love, when you create experiences, when you create a space for any experiences to come to you that are not in keeping with who it is that you want to be as a person, that's not functioning at your optimal level for joy, for life, to experience life as a thing of joy. And so whenever the chakras, when any of them are functioning disharmoniously, that means either the chakra, the petals that open up are either spinning there's something off with the spin, or that they haven't fully developed. So it's like a flower bud. So if you imagine a flower that never fully opened, it didn't get enough water or didn't get enough sunlight or whatever it needed in order to open fully, and it just stayed in the bud state. And from the bud state, it will start to disintegrate, start to wilt, start to wither, and never actually open fully and fully express itself. So when a flower opens all the way, it has these beautiful the pieces inside, and that's where the pollen is. So that's where when the flower opens all the way, it's fully expressed because it's able to open up, it's able to emit the smell, the pollen comes out, so it's able to reproduce. So all of these things are able to happen when a flower is fully open, but when a flower stays in the bud state, none of these things happen. So a flower can never fully actualize. And that's the same thing with the chakras. So a sacral chakra that's not functioning at its highest level of harmony can cause us to reject sexuality, to feel shameful or fearful about sexuality. We might have might counter, in the opposite end of that, might counter and be constantly excessively thinking about sexual fantasies because there is a desire that is being suppressed. And when this desire is suppressed, it just finds new ways, new outlets to come out. So what happens is that the going back to the healing is a place we seek balance. We seek balance to get back to healing, to where we're comfortable with our own sexuality, where we don't feel ashamed of our sexuality, where we feel joy from the sexual experience, and where we seek out experiences, sexual experiences that are going to bring us this type of joy. And sacral is not just about the physical act of sex. It's also about creativity. And so when our sexuality, when our sacral is suppressed, our creative capacity is also suppressed. So if you have trouble making creative solutions to problems that you encounter in your life, to challenges that come up, if you feel the need to wait for somebody to tell you how to do it, and there's no time where you ever feel safe coming up with your own solution, if you'd rather hang back and wait for somebody else to think of a plan, because just no ideas come to you. If you have something creative that you're supposed to be doing and you just feel really stuck and you just can't come up with anything creative to do, those are signs of disharmonious function, where the sacral is just not functioning at its maximum capacity. When we feel uninhibited, when, let's say even simple things like, there's a fun party, everybody's having a great time, and you see people out on the dance floor and they're just they might not even be doing a good job. They might be dancing all over the place and look completely ridiculous. But the difference between you who's watching them from the sideline and, making snide remarks or commenting about them from the sideline is that you are stuck inside your head and you're not living in a place of joy, while they, even though they might be dancing terribly, are out there on the dance floor actually enjoying themselves. They have they have activated their joy beyond the point where they're worried about how they look. And so when you think about that, when you think about life and about the feeling, just like when little children, they're still in themselves, before they arrive at an age when they're aware that other people are looking at them, that other people might react to them, before they learn shame, they're so free-flowing. And that same beauty of free-flowing, there are adults who retain that same beauty of free-flowing energy, and that free-flowing energy comes from the sacral. So we want to try to get to whatever degree is comfortable for us. Everybody doesn't have to get out on the dance floor and look like a fool, but if you feel it, you can feel inside yourself whether things like that are something for you. You can feel whether you feel a longing, a sense of longing when you see people relaxing themselves, when you see them just being silly and having fun and having a good time. And you, somewhere inside you kind of wish that you could do that too, but you just know that it's just not for you, and that's not the right behavior. And all of the mental constructs that you have, that you told yourself, are letting you know that you are not supposed to be doing that. And so you're locked into the rigidness of your own mental constructs instead of the free-flowing energy of your sacral, of that free, fluid, moving energy that allows you to just embrace the moment and do whatever is going on with total freedom. So when the sacral is not functioning harmoniously, then people will tend to be more, it's more common for people to become addicted to drugs and to become addicted to things like shopping, whichever type of drug it is, shopping, because drugs are not actually drugs. There are no drugs which are actually drugs. Everything that we take into our body does something different to our body, whether it's a vitamin, whether it's a bowl of spinach, whether it's lunch, whether it's a bottle of water. Everything we put inside of us alters our body in some way. What makes something a drug is how we respond and how we use it. So when we overuse something past the point of it being good or healthy or in balance for us, when we continue to need it and it's feeding some underlying root, some place that is damaged, and we continue to feed the damage habitually, then the item, the substance, the thing, the behavior, then it becomes a drug. So it's nice to go shopping. It's nice to enjoy nice things. But if you're willing to empty your bank account so that your survival needs aren't even met because you need to give yourself pleasure at any cost through new items, that's an addiction. If you can go to a party and have a drink on the weekend and have a few drinks, even if you can have a lot of drinks, and you can go away from the party and once the party's over, you're good and you're back in your own personal space, that's fine. But if you get to a point where you're losing out money, you're losing out, life opportunities, when you're losing things in order to be able to party, to be able to continue drinking or continue to use drugs, that means that there is something deeper going on there. That's the point when it becomes an addiction, where pleasure is an addiction. Now, that's when when the sacral is functioning like out of harmony. So that means it's almost to be spinning backwards. Now, in case this is the first episode that you're tuning in on, and you have heard about the chakras and you have some sense of how they look and how they move, contrary to popular belief, the chakras do not have like a one wheel that spins in one direction. Each chakra actually contains two different wheels, and they spin back and forth like blades, like that are going, counter to each other. And it's this motion that actually allows energy to go in, to be pulled in, drawn in, and also allows energy to be pushed out back into the auric field and back into the aura field of other people. So when the disharmonious functioning means that both sets of wheels are spinning in an off way. So the energy is either pulling in too much, emitting too much, or it's just like completely out of balance. When there's insufficient functioning with the sacral, that's when the energy is, like I was explaining about the flower bud before, the flower bud has just not fully developed. And now in this, it's really common for this, whereas like disharmonious functioning might happen when somebody has, say, a negative experience during puberty, where they're made fun of because their body is changing or because they haven't been explained. Well, a lot of times, parents, even not meaning, they'll mean well, but they'll wait until their child goes through some sort of puberty experience before they start explaining puberty to them. And so sometimes a lot of children have been raised where they don't know anything, or they're getting told something in school in this kind of like scientific laboratory type of way about their body, which is like a natural, organic thing that is connected to divine energy. And so they're explained about this body as though it's some like a meat bag, and they're not explained in a way that makes them aware of what it is that this vessel is actually capable of. When a child is explained, not a child, but a child, somebody who is just before puberty, who is approaching puberty and needs to know how their body is going to respond, how it's going to change. When a child of that age, a teenager, is told about the body and how the body functions and all of the levels of how the body works, from the physical vessel to the emotional body and the interrelation of all of those, then a young person can make a wiser decision about how they are with their body, what they do with their body, how they treat their body. When young people are made aware, not to be shamed out of like, oh, if you have sex outside of marriage, you'll be punished, or you're dirty. Those kind of experiences are what shut people down. Those shut people down. They shut down their sacral, so that they lose their creativity. They become shame of themselves. That's not ever a good way because by explaining somebody how the body actually functions and learning to understand the body with sacredness and love and respect and kindness, then if somebody loves themselves, if they've been taught and shown self-love, if they've been modeled self-love, once they're taught about these things that express self-love, they're going to most often choose the path of self-love. So there's no reason to teach people about sexuality by using fear or shame. There is no reason to tell somebody, to help somebody not have a baby. Oh, I don't want any teen mother in this house. And then you shame your daughter by, telling them that they're filthy if they start acting on the curiosity and the hormonal energy that they have coming out. That isn't a way to get somebody to be the best version of themselves. Shame and fear is never the right answer for that. Telling them what their body does, telling them about the sacred union, to explaining what actually happens to a body when there is a sexual encounter, explaining what happens to a body when a person allows free-flowing energy to move through them, and how their mind expands, how their creative ideas become so much bigger, so much more expanded. Those are things that we all want to strive for. So we don't want to shut off one, because shutting off one, the government has used the sexual chakra, the sacral chakra, as a tool of control for so long. This is an ancient tradition going back to Greece and Rome. They wove it into their political culture to use the damage of the sacral chakra in order to control the masses, in order to control people in slavery. Because when you have people who are fearful, ashamed, and not creative, they cannot think of their own solutions for their life. So therefore, you can insert whatever solutions that it is that you feel that will serve you best, and that's exactly what the government does. So if people are feeling like, the system that we live in isn't satisfying and isn't freeing and makes you feel limited, or makes you look around you and feel like we as a whole are limited, the thing that will set us free is actually taking back that sacral energy. So this is a particularly important chakra. The sacral chakra is connected to the throat, it's connected to the heart, and it's connected to the root. And it is all of them are all connected, but the most powerful connections to the sacral are the throat, the heart, and the root. And by the control of those, by the release of that control, there's a freedom that changes the course of a person's destiny. It becomes a very different reality when you feel connected to, there's a different confidence, when you flow with life, when you are open and you trust the process, when you feel free, when you understand, when you feel comfortable connecting with others, when there's free-flowing affection and love between you and the people around you. That is a very different reality to live than a fearful, shamed, closed, safe, careful, cutting yourself off from others in order to protect yourself. That's a whole different type of reality. No, that's not a healthy and happy reality for anyone to live. It bleeds energy right out of you. And so you end up tired and exhausted and addicted to coffee and other drugs that actually connect, that force your organs to push out just a little more energy to keep you going. And this is why they have the retirement age set at 65. People could be living to 100 and 120 happily and comfortably, but they know that if they suck away most of your life force for years and years and decades, that by the time you're in your early 60s, you're going to be so exhausted that you're basically not even fit to even work anymore. So they're just going to put you out to pasture and then just wait for you to die. And that's their response. They know how much they're beating up the sacral, how much they are destroying your energy, so they know exactly for how long they can use you for before they throw you away. So we spend a lot of time focused outward and trying to take back our power from the government and take back our power from society and take back our power from the media. Meanwhile, what we actually need to do is focus internally, because by healing these internal systems, by healing our own spiritual anatomy, we actually turn things around and end up healing the things that it is that we think that we're fighting externally. We don't need to fight anything externally. As soon as we heal what's going on internally, we are so powerful that there's nothing that can ever top divine source energy. There is nothing more powerful than that. It's like saying that you're going to, like the infinite massive universe, and then taking something on Earth and trying to say the thing on Earth is bigger than the infinite universe. There's nothing bigger than this infinite source energy. And so when we tap into that energy and allow it to flow through us, it moves through us, it heals us, it expands us, and it changes us. And once we have experienced that, there is no system that can hold us down from living our destiny and living up who we want to be. So the sacral of all the chakras, besides the love one, besides the heart, which is the root and foundation of all things, besides that, the sacral is so important to get it healthy and whole and balanced so that we can live lives of power and progression and joy and love. So last time, I spoke when I was speaking about the root chakra. On one episode, I spent just talking about my own personal experiences with my root chakra and things that happened in my childhood that damaged it. And so I just would like to kind of throw some things in, because there may be some of you who are listening who resonate with these childhood experiences, with these life experiences, and some of them may help you realize, oh, okay, so I have damage in that particular area. So and then what do I do? If I have damage in that way, in that place, what do I do? So let's first break down, what does it even look like? What does it look like when damage is created in your sacral? Jump on for a sip of water before I get there. So for me, my story started out, when I was a girl. My parents were together, they were married. And when I was 4, my parents got divorced because my father was cheating on my mother. And of course, at the time, I didn't know it, but over the years, as time passed later, I came to find that out. And so, of course, cheating is a sexual misconduct. And so knowing that, it put a certain type of energy on my sexuality. When we have to be witness to certain experiences in life, even though they're not our direct experiences, we can still become traumatized, because these type of experiences, we place them in certain categories. So when I see that, one parent wants to go out and is expressing and from an adult, being an adult, and also being spiritually wise, and just looking at the human journey without judgment, there is something that was taking place in my father for him to choose that path, because we always choose our path for some reason based on whatever it is that we're going through, things that we're conscious of and things that we are not aware of. And so he was going through that in whatever level of balance or imbalance that he was living that hadn't been addressed yet. And so so there's no judgment. So this is just an expression of life, just a story told about an expression of life as it was. And so my mother's response to it also, again, her response to it was anger and frustration, and she received it personally, and it damaged her really badly, to the point that she developed breast cancer, and she felt like her womanhood had been insulted. So there was a lot of, so going back into that story of my childhood, whatever I picked up energetically and what I picked up later on, mentally, it made the whole sacral, that was a very difficult, so that was very, very damaging for me. And then, so once my parents split up, I didn't get to see my father often, but I went through those experiences, and then so the experiences of, abandonment, of life changing and things like that, those experiences damaged my root chakra. And I spoke about that last time in my own anecdotes about the chakras. So this week, we're not going to go deeper into those kind of things, but once the root, which feeds the sacral, once the root is damaged, there's the potential for the sacral to be damaged. Like it's absolute. It's going to be damaged. Unless the root is healed, then the sacral cannot receive all of its own flow. So there were those kind of things. But then to compound on top of those issues that I experienced with my parents, while my mother was very ill with cancer. So by the time I was 7 years old, I was living with some friends of hers. And in the house where I was living, there was an older brother there. And I didn't know this family when I moved in with them. It was a good friend of my mother, a colleague of hers from work. And I went to live with them. And I was, at the age of 7, spent a good deal of my time being sexually assaulted by the older brother in the house, who was a teenager. And so this experience of, so already of having the experience of abandonment, because my father was gone, my mother was in the hospital, and I was living with strangers who I was afraid to open up to, afraid to speak to. I wasn't sure of my place in their world, and I didn't know what set of behaviors to develop in order to make myself safe in their space. So while this sexual experience was happening to me, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know, there are different types of sexual traumas that come to people, and we can kind of categorize sexual trauma into just the response to sexual abuse in two different ways, because there's a completely different energy when you experience sexual abuse from somebody who, in your mind, who you have been taught and you're aware that is like, this is wrong, this person has no business touching you, and that makes it okay. So that means when you attack back, when you fight back, when you do those things, that means it is okay. Inside your reality, whatever has taught you that, consciously or subconsciously, you have been made to understand that it is not okay for somebody to abuse your body in this way. So therefore, if somebody is abusing you, you fight back with everything you have in you. Now, that's a different sexual abuse scenario than somebody who is receiving sexual abuse from somebody who is at home, somebody who is in their family, somebody who other members of their family may love, or somebody who even that person may love. You may love the person and been taught that this is, this is uncle this or grandpa that, or you're, the neighbor, and you are not allowed to fight back. Because it's not polite, it's not right. They're an adult who you've been taught to trust. So somehow the mind of a child internalizes that type of situation as though maybe they are doing something wrong. Either that they, the child, are doing something wrong, or that the other person is doing something that is maybe not so wrong. And it feels wrong. And there's this turmoil about, well, this doesn't feel right, but I don't know what I can do about it. And then that develops its own issues, because the fear of not having anybody to come to your rescue, not having anybody to stand up for you or explain this experience, or anybody to make the experience stop happening. There isn't anything around you like that. And that's a completely different situation, to have to live with sexual abuse on a regular basis, where you are required, for your own survival and safety, where you're required to tolerate the experience once or repeatedly. It's very, very different, and a different set of behaviors. You have to create a different set of behaviors in order to cope with that type of experience than you do with the experience of somebody who has assaulted you, who you can put all of your fight, all of your effort, all of your energy, and a person who may have, you may have fought them off, and even if you are not successful, you may have been able to go after them in court and create some kind of situation of justice, which of course still doesn't remove the trauma, but to some degree, justice helps to assuage the trauma to some degree. Very, very different. And so I was in that situation, and so I didn't have anybody to defend me. And so I had to learn how to just allow, so I had to separate myself in my mind. I had to separate myself so that I wouldn't break. And having to use that type of response often creates a really severe inability to have healthy boundaries with people later in life. When you develop the ability to just smile and cope with things, a lot of times that behavior downloads into you as a way of being. And so for a lot of my life, when I got older, this is an important thing about the sacral chakra being connected to the throat. If you have been challenged with your boundaries in your childhood, if your boundaries have been traumatized through sexual abuse or any other type of way, You learn how to shut down your needs. You learn to shut down your speaking. You learn to shut down, whether it is your words, whether it's by actually not speaking, or whether it's by speaking words that are encrypted and mysterious. Whatever way that it expresses itself, the throat chakra becomes closed also by these experiences. We're taught that our boundaries don't matter, and we learn to stop asking for what we need because we know we're not going to get it. And so that, and then the creativity. So my creative expression became stifled. So before my mother becoming ill, and before the sexual assault that I experienced, I was extremely creative as a child. I loved artwork. I loved drawing. I was very, very deep in my imagination. I was extremely, I remembered dreams, and I had lots of connection to that part of reality, to the unseen things. I felt, it was a very rich and powerful world for me. And then once I experienced that, I spent a lot of time so focused on my external reality because I became hypervigilant. I became watching people's body language, watching people's energy. I could see, does somebody seem like they're, that they might be interested in me in some way that's not safe? And I started paying attention to those kind of things. And so by being hypervigilant about what was going on outside of me, I lost a lot of my creative capacity and my creative flow at that time. I started to feel ashamed. I felt ashamed because I had allowed that experience to happen to me. I didn't know what to do about it at the time, but I felt ashamed. I felt something wrong because I knew deep inside me that was something that I shouldn't have let someone do to me. And even though I had no one else to defend me, I felt I shouldn't have let that happen. But nobody is there for me. And so what I developed in my life because of that sexual invasion, I developed, and when the terrible and powerful thing about the sacral chakra is that stuff that becomes lodged in there, when you have trauma or psychic debris or things like that become lodged in there, it can get caught in a loop. And this loop can spin over and over and over and over. And this loop forms a story, and you begin to apply this story to everything in your life. So that experience, because that experience penetrated me there in that way, that story started to spin out to all the other parts of me too. So I started to believe nobody is there for me, nobody's there for me, nobody's there for me. And it became a story, a continual self-fulfilling prophecy, because I was always telling myself nobody's there for me. And I wasn't telling myself that at the conscious level, at a place where I could see it and grab it and rip it out and throw it away, or make sense out of it, or give it context. It was buried down deep inside me, and that story was spinning around and around and around, repeating over and over. So that story became my internalized story. And so because it came through the sacral, whereas like later on in my years after that experience, I experienced physical abuse. But physical abuse lodges itself in the body. Although it can be deeply traumatic as well, it lodges itself in the body in a different way than sexual abuse lodges itself in the body. I've spoken to boys, to young men, and to adult men who were sexually molested as boys, and there's a story that becomes entwined in the identity of self. As a boy is building his identity of who he is, that story becomes entwined in his identity of who he is, so he can feel not strong enough, not powerful enough, not good enough. And those stories we start to tell ourselves, they shut down our creative capacity. And they responded. And again, things always have a reaction. There's always an internalized reaction or an externalized reaction. So some people become outwardly violent and angry and force energy as a means of self-protection. Yet people who have experienced sexual abuse can put themselves in the position of the perpetrator, so that they are so hypervigilant about never having anybody invade their space again, that they become offenders, that they become the ones pushing out that energy. They seek out that energy, but because they feel in control. If they bring the energy first, then nobody can bring it to them. Nobody can take it from them. And so a lot of people look at people who've experienced that and think like, why would you do that? You know what it feels like to have that happen to you. Why would you do it to someone else? But it's a hypervigilant need for control of the situation to make sure that it never happens again. And the break of the sacral chakra is just such a tragedy because it changes the way you relate to others. It completely breaks down your capacity to trust yourself or trust others, and your ability to relate to others and seek out your needs, to seek out free expression in others can be deeply damaged. And sometimes this damage happens and lasts a person's lifetime. A person can never feel comfortable expressing affection or kindness towards others. They can feel embarrassed or ashamed when other people express affection or kindness towards them. And this is a damaged sacral, and this is really deeply, deeply important that we heal that energy and bring the sacral chakra back into balance. Because the next one, in the flow of the cycle of the body, the energy starts at the heart, and then it cycles down the body. It cycles down toward the root, and then it goes up again and cycles up the spine, and then comes back down around the front of the body, back down again to the heart. And there's another energy channel that goes in the opposite direction. So it goes upward from the root and goes upward and then down inside the body. So this one that's going up from the root, it goes up from the root, and then it goes up to the sacral, and from there it goes up to the solar plexus. And the solar plexus is where we take our defined sense of self and we start to interrelate with the world in a bigger way. So while the sacral is about how we have form connections, intimate connections with others, the solar plexus is about how we form connections with the world as a whole. So so our identity is formed in the root and the sacral. And once that identity has solidified, we take that identity and we take that out into the world. So we express ourselves into the world. What the type of person that you become is a direct result of what type of root chakra and sacral chakra experiences that you had in your childhood. And these cycles repeat themselves. So every 7 years. So the first 7 years of your life, you go through the first 7 chakras. You go through the root, all the way up to the crown, and it doesn't start there, but I'm using the root because we're going to talk later on. Once we get to the heart, I'm going to explain more deeply about how actually it starts with the heart, because the heart is the first place, when a fetus comes in, the first place that the energy awakens is at the heart, and then it goes around from there. But as we go up and around and through the different centers, we pick up something each cycle, and then it cycles back down again. So at 8 years old, then we go back again, we cycle back around at the root, and at the root, then it cycles back up. And so it continues to go up in this cycle around and around. And on each cycle, so every 7 years, we pick up so every 7 years is defined by a particular set. So the first 7 years of our life are defined by the root. The first 7 years of life are all about how we develop our connection, our sense of self, our identity. The next 7 years, from 8 to 14, those are the years that we figure out our freedom, our expression, our artistic creativity, our joy, our pleasure, seeking pleasure. And then later, toward the end of that second set of the 7 years, that's when we start to get interested in sexuality. That's with the ages of puberty. So all of those things develop. Then through the third cycle, from the ages of 15 to 21, that's when the solar plexus goes into development, the years of its development. And those are when we develop our identity and we start to go out into the greater world. Now we're graduating high school and going to college or going to get a job or figuring ourselves out and how we fit into the world as a whole. So all of these early years experiences have a massive impact. And just like the psychology has developed as a science. And when we look at psychology, a lot of people look at psychology and feel comfortable with psychology because it's considered a science. But actually, psychology is, and they'll believe in psychology, but then consider something like the chakras to be woo-woo and crazy and not real. But there's the science of psychology is equally as valid. Like, there is no difference in the validity of the two. The psychology is the science of studying the mind, and so it's the study of a part of the being that nobody is able to locate, because in psychology themselves, they're aware that it's not in the brain. The mind is not located in the brain. The mind has connector points in the brain, but the mind is not located in the brain. So how do you have a science of something that is non-local, that you don't know where it is, but yet you can call it valid? But then something like a chakra, where according to the same science, where you may not know where it is, but then that's not considered valid. Like, it doesn't make sense to see one as scientific and one as not, just because somebody repeats over and over and over that one is a science and the other is not. The ancients, before this current Western time, this very, very, very short in the scheme of things, the study of psychology is unbelievably short. For it's just less than 200 years old, probably about 150 years old, or let's see, about 200 years old now, almost coming close to 200 years old. Whereas this science of spiritual anatomy is something that is at least 8,000 years old. So we have records from deepest times that this science is valid on so many different levels. And so it's worth getting an understanding of exactly how the spiritual anatomy in the body works, and what we can do and what we can use in order to heal ourselves with that, in order to understand ourselves, in order to understand the role of these spiritual organs and these spiritual functions in our daily lives. Because when we can work towards something, when we can locate something, when we can locate the source of an imbalance or a disorder or a challenge, then we can find a place and we can find a way to heal it, because all of these things that have been located and understood also come with deep sciences of healing. So very, very powerful. So getting into the sacral. So next week, when we get back to the sacral, we have another week of that, and I'm going to have a special guest on next week so that we could talk about that. And if you are interested in finding out more about how to heal the chakras, how to heal any of them, you can go to my Patreon. It's Patreon at Temple of the Green Goddess, or you can find me on YouTube at The Fly Priestess. And I have videos, all sorts of videos explaining about different chakras, and we go into all types of things. We can go into crystals that heal, flower essences. We can go into different movements, and of course Wadjet Yoga. That we wouldn't be able to get there without the WADJEDI. Specifically, Wadjet Yoga is serpent power yoga, and the postures, the geometric movements, and the energy, the breath energy of Wadjet Yoga is able to heal so many of these issues and imbalances. A lot of the issues that I have worked through in my own life have been the result of using serpent power energy as one of my most important tools. My most central tools to my healing process has been using serpent power energy, what some people call Kundalini yoga, what in ancient Kemet is called Wadjet. What in Chi or Ki, these are the same types of energies, and they're the same forces, the same understanding of different places, different cultures at different times have tapped into an understanding of these energies and how they move through the body, and learned how to use them in order to heal. So check out Wadjet Yoga videos on YouTube. Find me on Patreon for some deeper other types of healing, including different types of plant medicines from around the world. And let's get deeper into this journey. So next week, please join me with my special guest, and for the week after that, then we're going to be talking about the sacral, and I'll go through some different postures, some different mudras, some different breath work, and things like that that will help to heal the sacral. If you have been through any type of negative experience with your sacral energy, if you feel stuck and blocked in your creativity and you want to finally open that up and feel more free inside of yourself, then you are not alone. Definitely feel free to join and connect. Jump in the Patreon community. There's a lot of conversation going on over there where everybody can talk about their experiences and talk about what kind of experiences, what kind of things they use for healing, and cross information and share. So for a like-minded community, jump on over there. And I appreciate you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the solution in this world, part of the vibration raising. And let's keep this journey going. Lots of love to you all, and I hope that everybody has a wonderful night. Want to dive deeper into this topic? Join me on Patreon at Temple of the Green Goddess to unlock exclusive content that will expand your knowledge and spark thought-provoking conversations.